Hi guys, it's your science teacher here with another video. This time I'm going to go through the whole of B15, which is genetics and evolution. I hope you enjoy this video as much as I did when I was at school. I used to love finding out about Darwin and all the different species that roam our planet and how they all evolve into the wonderful species that they are. So without further ado, let's get into today's video. We're going to start off the topic by looking at evidence of evolution, and then we are going to delve into some different theories of evolution that came about before natural selection. The first evidence of evolution is perhaps the biggest piece of evidence that we have, which is a fossil record. That shows that we evolved from different species. And what the fossil record shows is that species become more complex over time. The fact that the fossils become more complex over time supports Darwin's theory of natural selection because of the fact that if you are better to survive in an environment, you are likely to live on and reproduce. Now, it is impossible to say what definitively was the origin of life on Earth. However, scientists now predict that the Earth is between 3 to 4 billion years old, and what they use is rock fossils and fossils of the ground from around that time. Now, it's all well and good saying that you can use fossil records to prove Darwin's theory of evolution, and why can we not use it to trace back the origin of life? Well, it's really difficult because we have a quite incomplete fossil record. This is because of the fact that fossils only form in certain conditions. One reason we have an incomplete record is because of the fact that the earliest organisms on Earth were soft-bodied, and soft-bodied organisms don't leave behind very many fossils. Also, fossils only form in sedimentary rocks, and if they are subject to high pressures or temperatures, as in metamorphic or igneous rocks, the fossil will simply just be burnt away. And also, we haven't explored everywhere. There could be many more thousands of fossils still to find. Also, what huge gaps in the fossil records have shown is they've shown that there have been 5 mass extinction events in the Earth's history. Now, what can cause these mass extinctions which wipe out a variety of different species? Well, what was thought to have wiped out the dinosaurs is a meteorite shower. But there are other theories of what could have wiped out the dinosaurs, such as a volcanic eruption, a solar flare, or a rapid change in the Earth's climate. Perhaps the biggest issue that the world is facing currently is the fact that we could be causing another mass extinction event, which is incredibly scary. The rate that we are warming up the planet is causing these monumental changes, and different species aren't having time to adapt. And if we do not change our actions, we could be responsible for the next mass extinction event. We do also see some species go extinct during separate times in history, which isn't a mass extinction event. These can just occur when there is a new predator around that outcompetes it. Or it can happen through the climate changing, and therefore they're no longer adapted suitably for their environment, or they can be wiped out by a certain disease. But species extinction and mass extinction events are completely separate issues. Evolution is always thought to happen on such large scales and large objects and happen over millions and millions of years. However, we can actually observe evolution happening using bacteria, and natural selection doesn't always happen positively for humans, as in antibiotic resistant bacteria. Down here I have a little bit of a diagram that I can use to explain antibiotic resistant bacteria as well. And what I've got over here is I have some normal bacteria, and then I clearly have one in the center that is a little bit different. This is an antibiotic resistant bacteria. And the way that antibiotic resistant bacteria come about is because of the fact they are a random mutation. And just like with species, this random mutation has an advantage. It has an advantage because of the fact it is not affected by the antibiotics. Therefore, when antibiotics are taken, all the other bacteria are killed. This means that the antibiotic resistant bacteria has been successful and will go on to reproduce and produce more of itself. So what we've learned is that fossil records can show evolution happening over millions and millions of years, and antibiotic resistant bacteria show evolution can also happen very quickly over a few years. Due to random mutations, there are many varieties of different species now on planet Earth, and we need to find ways of classifying these species into different categories. A Swedish scientist called Carl Linnaeus was the first scientist to come up with a classification system for all of the different animals. Take the two species below. We have a cow over here on the left, and we have a dolphin. What I want you to do is, just for a second, I want you to think about any similarities between them two species. Okay, you've probably thought of a few by now, and what you've probably realised is they actually have more in common than you first think. For example, they both have a backbone. They are both vertebrate animals. Also, they are both mammals. They both breathe oxygen. And they both have live young. And what Linnaeus did was he came up with categories to put different animals and different plants into. Although the dolphin and the cow were similar, they did divulge at some stage, meaning they did split apart from each other where the similarities did end. That's because of the fact that this organisation that Linnaeus came up with has different sections. We first have to start with a kingdom, and there's 5 different kingdoms that we could get. They are animals, plants, fungi, bacteria, and archaea. If we go into animal organisation though, we can split it down into more subcategories. For example, the next stage is phylum, and the phylum splits it up into vertebrate animals and invertebrates, and that just means animals with a backbone or not. Now, Chordata, it chooses the vertebrate option. So then you go down to class. This is for a crow. You might see down here there's a picture of it. It's a type of crow here that you have, and it is in the class of Aves. And you probably can guess from that name what that actually means. Aves being close to aviation. That is for birds. Then it is in the order of Passeriformes, which are basically any 4-toed birds. Now, you would never ever have to be able to remember this about a certain species. It would usually ask you where you think it's branched off from another species. It's in the family of Corvidae, which holds all of the species of crow, raven, magpie. They all fit in this category. Now, you may say you've understood all of this, but you don't really understand what makes a species separate from one another. So what makes a crow different from a raven and a magpie? And basically what a species is a species is something that can produce fertile offspring. So, for example, if a crow breeds with a raven, maybe it would have a child, however, its child would not be fertile, meaning it could not have any babies. Now, you've probably seen with lions and tigers, if you've ever watched Joe Exotic, he bred lions and tigers to make a liger, and ligers are an example of a crossbred species, and they are not fertile themselves. If you are doing combined science, well done, you have finished today's video. If you're doing triple science, just a little bit more to go, but really well done, and just stay focused just for a few more minutes. What we are going to look at now is a few different theories on evolution and also how genetics play a part in evolution and how we know genetics play a part in evolution. And the person who came up with the idea that genes were the reason that things get passed on was a scientist called Mendel. He was also a well-known priest, and you can see in his attire that he's wearing now, he's actually wearing his priest collar. And Mendel discovered using peas that he could crossbreed the peas to control what colour they were. There are two different species of peas. There were the yellow peas and the green peas. And he found out that when he bred them together, he could use combinations and predict what colour pea would be produced. Mendel investigated genes in peas by breeding the two colours. What he did was he took green peas, which had the genotype of PP, and he bred them with yellow peas, which had the genotype PP, small. You can see which one is dominant and which is recessive from the capital letters. And what he found out was he ended up with children that were all green, but when he bred the children together, he could end up with yellow peas. And this puzzled scientists. When he bred these two children together, he found out that he could make combinations that produced yellow peas. Just like that. You probably remember a lot of this stuff from the topic of reproduction, but it does come up in evolution because this is how genes do get passed on using these alleles. Before people knew about genes, they came up with wide varieties of ideas about what could cause evolution within species, and Lamarck, who was a French zoologist, came up with his own theory of evolution, and he used giraffes to explain his theory of evolution. Because he was a zoologist, he was around many different species of wildlife, and the way he came up with his theory was if giraffes were born short, what would happen was during their lifetime, they would do a lot of stretching, trying to reach for the tallest branches in order to get their food. And over time, they would grow bigger during their lifetime. Then, when they have babies, they will pass on this gene. So that was Lamarck's theory of evolution. It's now commonly accepted that Marxism is wrong, and that idea has been taken over by natural selection. And we're going to look at some more evidence for natural selection now, and we're going to look at Charles Darwin and how he came up with his theory of natural selection. So Charles Darwin's idea of natural selection all starts off with a random mutation causing an advantageous gene that can then be passed on through generations. But how did Charles Darwin come up with this idea? What he did was he flew to the islands of the Galapagos, and what he noticed was on these different islands there were different species of the bird finches. On each of the island, they had different size. The size of them and shape of the beaks was related to the food they were eating on the island. Some of the birds had incredibly long and wide and sharp beaks in order for cracking open hard nuts, whereas some of the finches had incredibly short beaks that were incredibly thin for eating insects and catching insects and being really swift. And the variations that had resulted were in fact now new species. Darwin didn't really understand the different types of species of finch at the time. He just realised that the random mutations had given them a survival instinct. It became to the work of Alfred Wallace that would assist him in creating the final version of natural selection that we kind of believe today to be the correct theory for evolution. Alfred Wallace came up with the idea of speciation. And speciation is where animals develop into a new species. And this often results due to isolation from the other species. And this is exactly what happened with Darwin's finches. Darwin's finches got separated from each other due to the fact the Galapagos Islands are volcanic islands that are all separate islands, and it would take a long flight for the finches to get between the islands. So they became isolated from one another. And when they are isolated from each other, the random mutation has an advantage, and therefore a new species is produced, which will no longer be able to breed with the old species. In fact, experiments have been done now to prove Wallace's theory of speciation. Here there is a single species of bee, and we can actually, in fact, create two different species of bee from this one species. One species of bee was fed just starch food for a period of time, whereas the other species of bee was fed maltose food for a period of time. And after 8 or more generations have passed, these two species can now no longer breed with one another to produce fertile offspring, proving speciation, proving the fact that you have created two different new species. I hope you found this topic as interesting as I do. Remember, if you did enjoy the video, please drop it a like and subscribe to the channel.